Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to Cheating Stories Bests so you never miss out on new and compelling tales. Today's story hits close to home and explores a scenario many can relate to. What happens when your wife steps out with a soccer player? Buckle up as we dive into a story that mirrors this plot. Hello, I'm Tom J. My wife, Linda, and I have been together for years, but the situation I'm about to describe was nothing short of a nightmare. Standing at 5 feet 10 inches and weighing 165 pounds, I may not be the tallest or the strongest, but I've always had my strengths. Linda and I met during college when I was 23 and she was 21. I was juggling my studies with my service in the Army, while Linda was pursuing a degree in biology. My military career, though not consistently stationed in hot zones, was fraught with danger. Our unit was often tasked with high-stakes missions that required precision and, at times, lethal force. My specialty was in close combat planning, and after graduating from college at 25, I left the Army 2 years later to marry Linda. We started a family and had 2 beautiful daughters. I transitioned to a quieter life, handling accounting for local businesses and doing some sales from home. Linda took on the role of primary caregiver for our children. After 10 years of marriage, Linda decided to return to work. She took a position at a local laboratory affiliated with the college, now that both of our girls were in school. We continued to live in the house I grew up in, which I had purchased from my parents when they relocated to Florida. Thanks to some lucrative military missions, I had managed to save up and invest wisely. One February evening, we decided to join some friends for a night out. There were 8 of us, all with babysitters for the kids. Linda and I booked a room at a hotel connected to a popular dance club. Linda looked stunning in a blue silk dress that accentuated her 5 feet 6 inches frame. We enjoyed a delightful dinner and danced the night away. That was until a group of 6 people walked in. Among them was Mark Stevens, a well-known midfielder for the local soccer team. He was accompanied by a charming blonde who wore a large, sparkling wedding ring. Our friend June informed us that the blonde was a cheerleader for the team and was engaged to Stevens. It wasn't long before Stevens' gaze fell upon our table. Without any hesitation, he approached Linda and asked her to dance. My heart sank as I watched him bypass me entirely. I placed my hand on Linda's shoulder to stop her, but she shrugged it off and followed Stevens to the dance floor, never casting a glance back at me. My irritation grew as Linda, who had been my partner, melted into Stevens' arms during a slow dance. I decided to make my way to the bar, avoiding their embrace. The women at our table expressed their discontent, but I ignored their comments. As I sipped my coffee at the bar, I could see Linda scanning the room for me. When the dance ended, she returned to our table, looking somewhat concerned. I approached her and asked, "Did you have fun?" Linda's response was evasive, and June chimed in, "Tom, it was just a dance, nothing to worry about." I was taken aback by what I perceived as an insult. "I think I need to make something clear," I said. "I don't need her to come back. Let her know this when you speak to her, our marriage is over." The table erupted into shock and confusion, but I was resolute. June, trying to offer some consolation, said, "Tom, you have to let her spend the night. She'll be back tomorrow." But my mind was made up. I ran outside just in time to see Linda climbing into a red Escalade, which then sped away. When I returned, June informed me that Linda had left with Mark Stevens. I was fuming and felt a wave of betrayal. The friends at the table were buzzing with the news, but my anger overshadowed everything. I was done, there was no turning back. The night ended in chaos, with me grappling with the harsh reality of my wife's infidelity and the abrupt end of our marriage. They all thought I was being too harsh, so I snapped at them, "I don't want anything to do with any of you anymore. You all knew what was happening, and no one warned me. Maybe I could have stopped her if I had known." Now, it seemed she was about to lose everything because of a single night. I stormed over to the front desk, but instead of the answers I was looking for, I found a blonde woman sitting with the other 4 who had arrived with Stevens. She was in tears. I approached her and asked, "Are you his girlfriend?" "Yes, I was," she replied through her sobs, "but not anymore." "Where did they go?" "To our house in Cherry Lane," she said. "He promised he would never do this once we were engaged." "Excuse me?" I interrupted, "Was that your wife you're talking about?" "Was is the key word here," I said, feeling the anger boil inside me. "He'll finish with her in the morning and take her home. He likes to gloat over his accomplishments." I could barely contain my contempt. At that moment, 2 other men, one black, the other white, who were with her looked offended. I chose to ignore them and handed my business card to May, asking her to call me if she could. She gave me a weak smile while tears streamed down her face. I turned and walked away. I grabbed my coat but left Linda's behind. I went up to the hotel room, took my suitcase, and checked out. As I drove home, a plan began to take shape in my mind. I'd been through situations like this before, back when I was in the military, and that experience had kept me alive. I wished I had formulated a plan before Linda had left. When I arrived home, I drove my car into the garage, went inside, and activated the security system. I headed down to the basement and retrieved a rope I had kept for years. Upstairs, I stripped off my clothes and jogged to the second floor. I gathered black underwear, a black hoodie, dark gray sweatpants, old sneakers, and 2 pairs of gloves. I also grabbed a balaclava. Dressed in this outfit, I went up to the attic, secured the rope to a beam just like I had done as a child, and climbed out through a narrow window. I dropped down the side of the house into the forest. I sprinted to the side fence, leaped over it, and made my way to the workshop. Inside, I grabbed a backpack, a few extra wool socks, a pocket knife, and an old hand axe from the depths of my toolbox. I packed everything into the backpack, took my bike, and pedaled towards the river, cutting through a small forest. I crossed the bridge and headed toward Cherry Lane. I spotted a house with a statue of a football player and a red Escalade parked in front. I took out the axe and knife, jumped over the fence, and raced past the SUV. Using the axe, I shattered the passenger side window, setting off the alarm. I then darted onto the porch and hid behind a column near the door. I didn't have to wait long. The lights came on, and the door opened. The idiot who came out used his key fob to disable the alarm. He stepped outside, carrying a semi-automatic pistol. As he passed by me, I swung the axe and struck him on the head. He fell, and I delivered a powerful final blow with both hands. I quickly closed the front door behind me and fled. I scrambled back over the stone wall and returned to my bike. I changed into the wool socks, stashed the axe, knife, gloves, and shoes into the backpack, zipped it up, and rode off towards the river. When I reached the bridge, I tossed the entire backpack as far as I could into the fast-moving river, which had swelled from recent rain. I then rode back through the forest to the workshop. Inside, I changed out of my socks and into a fresh pair of sneakers. I sprayed the bike's handles and pedals with an ammonia solution and wiped them clean. I returned to the house, jumped over the fence, and climbed back up the side of the house. It wasn't as easy as I had hoped, but I managed and slipped through the small window. I pulled in the rope, wiped down the window sill with a rag, and carried the rope to the basement. I stripped off all my clothes, including the mask and gloves, and tossed them into the washing machine. I took a long, hot shower in the basement bathroom, washing everything thoroughly twice. Once done, I put on my gym shorts and headed upstairs. I left the basement door open so I could hear when the washing machine finished. I changed into the clothes I had worn to the club the night before, went back downstairs, and transferred the wet clothes into the dryer. Upstairs, I prepared some snacks and poured myself a glass of whiskey. I sat for a while, reflecting on everything that had transpired. When the dryer stopped, I took the clothes upstairs, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction at having executed my plan. I meticulously put everything back in place, stowing away the balaclava in its usual spot at the back of the closet. Checking my watch, I noted it was 2:50 a.m. The entire ordeal, beginning when I returned home from the club around midnight, had been a whirlwind of chaos and emotion. Exhausted, I sank into the sofa and poured myself another glass of whiskey, hoping it would help me sleep. I eventually dozed off, only to be jolted awake by the doorbell at 6:02 a.m. Groggy, I glanced at the door camera display and saw two figures, an African-American woman and a white man, both of whom appeared to be police officers. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. I opened the door, squinting at them. "Who are you? You look like police officers," I said. "I'm Detective Asper, and this is Detective Logan," the woman replied, showing me their badges. I squinted at them, my mind racing. Is this about Linda? Did something happen to her? Did he hurt her? No, she wasn't physically harmed, Detective Asper responded, but Mr. Stevens was attacked. May we come in? Of course, I said, stepping aside. Where is Linda? Did you bring her with you? Detective Logan shook his head. No, sir. She's in the hospital, receiving treatment for shock. I paused, absorbing the news. We exchanged glances as I motioned them to sit. Have a seat, I offered, pointing to the sofa. They chose to sit in separate chairs with straight backs, so I settled into the sofa myself. I think you should explain what happened, Detective Asper said, and Detective Logan added, what have you been doing since your wife left the club with Stevens? Just tell us what happened, Asper urged. All right, I began. I went to our hotel room, packed up my things, checked out, and came straight home. I drank myself to sleep on the sofa. You woke me up. Is there anyone else here? Detective Logan asked. No, the children are staying with the nanny for the night, I replied. Did you make any calls or send messages to prove your whereabouts? Asper inquired. No, but I never left, I answered. Asper glanced around. I see you have a security system. What does it cover? It monitors all the doors, I explained. I think it can confirm I was here. I led them upstairs to the office and showed them the computer setup. I demonstrated the security system's data, which recorded activity from 6 p.m. until the detectives arrived. They watched as I displayed footage from all three doors, the front, side, and sliding patio door leading to the pool. The side I had used had no door, only two large, non-opening windows, so there was no surveillance there. We'll need to take this computer, Logan said. Why? I protested. You saw me download the security data. Because you could have tampered with it before we arrived, he explained. Fine, I said, but I can't be without it for more than a day. It's a work computer, and I need it. I have a replacement, but it's not ideal. I'll transfer the files onto this external drive for you, I said, as I did so. I let them look around but insisted they stay together and accompany me. They took a few pictures and left by 7:10 a.m. I immediately called Linda's parents, John and Stephanie. Although they lived next door, they were at their lake house. I updated them on the situation and informed them that Linda was at the hospital. John was stunned, while Stephanie, though concerned, didn't seem entirely surprised by Linda's actions. Are you going to see her? Stephanie asked. No, I replied, that's why I'm calling you. I really don't want anything to do with her after what happened. It's unfortunate that Mr. Stevens was attacked, but it's not my fault. He has a history of such incidents. When she's out of the hospital, she needs to stay away from me in the house. We can arrange to have her belongings moved. Why don't you move? The children have lived here all their lives, John suggested. This is my home, I asserted. It's not community property acquired during the marriage. John, being a lawyer, was probably trying to find a compromise. You'll just have to wait and see, he said. That's pretty harsh, Tom, Stephanie added. Not as harsh as what she did to me, I replied, ending the call. Next, I reached out to my parents in Florida. I explained the situation as best I could, and they were also shocked by Linda's actions. My dad turned on the TV and informed me that there were news reports about Stevens being attacked. The news of Mark's death didn't come as a surprise to me. I was already stewing over the situation when the phone rang. It was the landline, and Judy's voice came through, shaky and urgent. Tom, where's Linda? We heard Mark was killed, she asked, her concern palpable. She's in shock and in the hospital, I replied curtly. You saw her yourself, didn't you? I don't know which hospital she's at, and honestly, I don't plan to see her. Judy pleaded, don't be like that. She needs your support. I'm done supporting her, I snapped. I don't care if her big night is ruined. If it was ruined, then that's the consequence. Judy hung up, leaving me to deal with my tangled emotions. I took another shower, dressed, and went to pick up the kids from the babysitter. It was around 8:20 when I arrived, and to my relief, they hadn't heard any details about the previous night's events. Once home, the kids wanted to know where Linda was. I told them, I don't think she'll be here today. She's got something she needs to take care of. We'll spend the day without her. Can we just dress for football? They asked. Sure, I agreed. I took them to the soccer complex where they had games scheduled for noon and 1:30. Watching them play was a welcome distraction. Michelle, the youngest, was delightful, while Laura, though less skilled, gave it her all. It was good exercise for them, and it was good for me to focus on something other than my mounting frustration. After the games, we treated ourselves to ice cream and headed back home. I noticed several missed calls on my phone, one from Linda's parents, informing me she was at St. Jude's and unresponsive, one from a doctor at the hospital, asking me to call back, and one from Judy, who updated me that Linda was at the police station but wasn't speaking to anyone. Judy suggested I cool off and bring the kids to her. I told the girls that their mom was in the hospital, unharmed physically but emotionally shaken by the events of the previous night. They wanted details, and I decided to be honest, albeit blunt. Your mother went to a famous football player's house last night. Something happened while she was there, someone attacked the player. It wasn't her, but she must have found him or something. That's why she's in the hospital. The girls were silent, processing the information. I told them to get dressed, and we went to the hospital. I called Dr. Laura Thompson back. She explained that Linda was in a catatonic state, traumatized, and suggested that visiting her might be helpful for Linda's recovery. I really don't want to see her, I said. But I can bring the girls if you think it might help. They're ready to go. Dr. Thompson agreed, and we arranged to meet her in room 31 in 30 minutes. Dr. Thompson, a psychiatrist in her late 40s, met us at the door. We talked briefly before she turned her attention to the girls. She explained that their mother was in complete shock, oblivious to her surroundings, but that seeing the girls might be beneficial. Laura and Shelley approached their mother hesitantly. Linda sat on the bed, staring blankly at the TV where cartoons played. Laura touched her hand and called out, "Mom." Shelley followed suit, but there was no response. Shelley began to cry, and I picked her up, holding her close while I glanced at Linda, who remained unresponsive. "Well, we tried," I said, guiding them to the exit. "Will she wake up?" Laura asked. "Of course, someday," I reassured her. "Maybe you'll be able to see her again when she's more aware." "What if she doesn't wake up?" Shelley whispered. "She will," I said, though not entirely sure myself. "Maybe not soon, but she will." Dr. Thompson promised to notify us when Linda regained her senses. With that, we left the hospital. The drive home was somber, both girls crying quietly in the backseat. Maybe bringing them to see Linda wasn't the best idea, but I hoped it might help, despite my anger and resentment towards her. Back home, I made scrambled eggs and toast, involving the girls in cooking as a way to distract and engage them. Afterward, I put on a movie for them, trying to create some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. As I watched them settle in, I couldn't shake the sadness and guilt gnawing at me. I wanted to be there for the girls and for Linda, despite everything that had happened. I retreated to my office and dialed my friend, hoping he could shed some light on what had transpired at the Stevens house after I left. He was a public defender and known for his sharp legal acumen. He explained that while police reports were off-limits to me, ambulance mileage reports were public records. I asked him to check if he could find anything out, and we wrapped up the call. An hour later, my friend called back. He mentioned he had emailed me the details on the ambulance call. I filled him in on the police visit and the security system's lack of evidence. He reassured me that if the system showed no one had entered or exited between the time I got home and when the police arrived, there was likely nothing to worry about. However, he cautioned that the police might seek a search warrant or want to question me again. He suggested I consult a lawyer just in case. Although I wasn't convinced I needed one, I decided to follow his advice and contacted a lawyer. The ER report was unsettling. The police had found Linda at the scene with Stephen's head resting in her lap, covered in blood and wearing only a thin robe. Her repetitive cries of "no, no, no" had been recorded as she was transported to the hospital. During the ambulance ride, she remained unresponsive, and the officer accompanying her was unable to get any information from her about the attacker. The whole situation was distressing, leaving me to wonder if she would ever fully recover. I delved into researching PTSD, a condition I had previously explored for myself. I learned that while people often recover from a catatonic state, PTSD could linger for years. The lawyer, Joan Drake, scheduled a meeting for Monday morning at 9:30 and provided me with her cell phone number in case the police arrived early. They didn't show up, so the girls and I spent Sunday trying to keep things normal. I tried to reassure them that Linda would eventually come back and that she would need our support. Inwardly, I fretted about Linda's potential reaction. I was confident she hadn't seen me clearly, and if she had seen anything, it would only have been a figure in all black, wearing a mask. Still, there was a nagging worry that she might suspect me. I had always kept a low profile, so I hoped she wouldn't associate the attack with me. On Monday, I took the girls to school and followed local news coverage of Stephen's murder. Linda's name wasn't mentioned, but it was reported that Stevens had been attacked while entertaining a married woman outside his home. A neighbor had called the police after hearing Linda's screams. As of now, no one outside the authorities had linked Linda or me to the murder, but I expected that could change over time. Joan Drake, a poised blonde in her mid-40s, was also quite tense, as my friend had described. I recounted the entire story from the beginning and handed over a copy of the ambulance report. She was visibly shocked. I assured her that the CCTV footage, which had not been tampered with, showed no one entering or leaving the house between the time I got home and the police arrival. I requested the return of my computer, as I needed it for work. Joan called the police station and spoke with Detective Asper. "Hello, Detective," she said. "This is Joan Drake. I'm calling about Tom J. I'd like to know if I can return his work computer." "Well, I think we've had enough time to check for any changes," the detective responded. "No, there weren't any," Joan replied. "I'll send someone tomorrow morning to pick it up." "Actually, I'll send someone from the office, he won't come," Joan said, raising her hand to indicate I would go. She nodded in understanding. "Okay, he'll be there at 9 o'clock. After Joan hung up, I informed her that I wouldn't be talking to the police without recording our conversations. I left that afternoon, and when the girls came home from school, they immediately inquired about Linda. I had already contacted the doctor, and there were no significant updates. The girls settled into their homework, and later, we enjoyed a pizza dinner. I joked that if Linda didn't come home soon, I'd have to learn to cook. This made them laugh, though I actually considered myself a decent cook, despite not having cooked much at home. As I was preparing to settle in for the evening, Laura, Linda's sister, came upstairs and asked if I could ever forgive Linda for being with another man. Maybe, I said, I really don't know right now. I just want her to get better. At that moment, the landline phone rang. It was Jim Bean from the Tribune on the phone. "Mr. J," he began, "this is Jim Bean from the Tribune. We have some information suggesting that your wife, Linda, was with Mark Stevens when he was killed. Can you confirm this? I wouldn't want this to become public if it's not true." I took a deep breath before responding. "Hello, Jim. I'm not going to confirm or deny anything. My kids are in school, and I'd prefer to keep this out of the public eye if possible. If your publication causes any harm to my family, I'll take legal action against you in the Tribune." Jim's voice was steady but apologetic. "I understand your concern, but there's nothing I can do to stop this from coming out. I see there's a TV truck outside your house. It looks like the situation is already getting out of hand." I glanced out the window and saw the Channel 7 news truck parked in front of the house. "You're right," I said. "It's already a mess. Sorry, Jim, but I have to go." As soon as I hung up, I heard a knock on the door. I looked through the security camera and saw a young woman holding a microphone. I spoke through the intercom, "Get off my property. You're trespassing, and I'll call the police." The woman persisted, "Is your wife home, Mr. J?" I immediately dialed the local police department and requested their help in removing the press from my property. They responded quickly and managed to clear a group of 6 people off the porch, though they didn't leave the area entirely. 4 news trucks remained parked nearby. I then called Dr. Thompson to ensure that Linda was safe and secure from the media frenzy. Afterward, I spoke with the girls and suggested they might stay somewhere else with me until things calmed down. However, they insisted on continuing their schooling, even if it meant living elsewhere. I said I'd think about it. Next, I reached out to my lawyer, Joan, seeking advice on how to handle the media storm. Joan agreed to issue a statement to the press. The statement, released through her office, emphasized that our family wished to continue our daily lives as normally as possible. It made clear that I would not comment on rumors about Linda and warned that continued media presence outside our home could lead to legal action. Meanwhile, Detective Asper and her superior scheduled a press conference for 7 p.m. I tuned in to hear the latest updates. The police confirmed that Mark Stevens was attacked outside his home and killed with a sharp object. Although a woman had been present in the house at the time, there was no indication she witnessed the attack. The investigation was ongoing. A reporter asked about the woman's marital status and if her husband was a suspect. Detective Asper responded, "As you already know, the woman is married. We've thoroughly investigated her husband, and there's no indication of his involvement. In fact, he was at his home, some distance away from the scene of the crime, throughout the night." Another reporter inquired about the other women Stevens had been involved with. "We investigated allegations that Stevens frequently seduced married women," the detective explained. "There was some truth to these claims. It appears he did have affairs with several married women, often in the presence of their husbands." Chief Johnson abruptly ended the briefing. "That's all for now. If there are any updates before our next briefing on Wednesday, we'll let you know." The media storm outside our home continued, but the police managed to clear out the press from our street. I made arrangements with the girls' school to have their assignments sent to us electronically or delivered here over the next few days. I also warned Linda's parents about the press, though no reporters had approached them yet. By Tuesday, the situation seemed to improve slightly. Dr. Thompson called to inform me that Linda was starting to respond and that the police were with her. I updated Linda's parents and gathered the girls to take them to the hospital. When we arrived, the police were just leaving. Detective Asper said she would like to speak with me after my meeting with Linda. I agreed. Linda still seemed in a daze. She greeted the girls with a faint smile and a hug but avoided eye contact with me. The girls told her about the media trucks and the chaos at school, but Linda appeared to drift off again. Dr. Thompson suggested that we let Linda rest. I left the room to speak with Detective Asper. Detective Asper approached me with a serious expression. It seems like Linda is slowly improving. We're not sure of the exact timeline for her recovery. Are you planning to take her home once she gets better? I asked. Detective Asper hesitated. It's too soon to say. I think you should give her some space for now. It's a difficult time for everyone. I nodded, knowing that the road ahead would be challenging, but hoping that Linda's recovery and our family's healing would eventually come. What other consequences could she face, aside from what has already happened? I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. It's not just about punishment, Detective Asper replied with a sigh. It's about respect and trust. Right now, it seems you have neither for her, and she might feel the same about you. Asper's comment stung. You're just trying to set me up, I said sharply. You know full well I had nothing to do with the attack on Stevens. Asper smiled, a hint of skepticism in her eyes. I'm aware of your background in the Army and your impressive reputation. While an average person might not pull off something like this, someone with your skills could potentially manage it. I didn't do it, I insisted. We have security footage from Stevens' house that shows no one entered or left between the time I got home and when the police arrived. Not my problem, Asper replied coldly. I was just stating possibilities. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. Her parting words felt like a veiled threat. Over the next few days, Linda's condition seemed to stabilize. Each day, I dropped off the girls at school but kept my distance from Linda. On the fourth day, she was scheduled to be discharged. She requested a private conversation with me, and I agreed to meet her alone, sending the girls away. I'm sorry for putting you in such an awful position, Linda began, her voice heavy with regret. I know that apologizing might not make much difference now, especially with everything on national news. Linda's words seemed hollow as she continued. I just want to go home. The media are out there, and they'll follow us from the hospital. I don't want the girls' lives ruined further. Maybe I can slip away without attracting too much attention. I raised an eyebrow. I'll have security contacted to ensure your safety. I'm not sure if I want to be close to you right now, but I don't have much choice. Linda sat on the edge of the bed, looking down. I didn't want you to get hurt. I thought you loved me and that we could get through this. I didn't really think it through. Did you have an affair with Stevens? I asked, struggling to control my emotions. No, she said, we were in bed, but the commotion started before anything happened. I studied her closely, sensing deception. I can't say I believe you completely. I don't think I can ever trust you again. But we'll see how things go. I love you, Linda said, her voice barely a whisper. Without acknowledging her sentiment, I turned and walked out of the room. I arranged for hospital security to pick Linda up and transport her home in a car scheduled for 4 p.m. The transfer went smoothly, and she arrived home around 4:45. The house was filled with a tense atmosphere. The children and her parents were there, and I had made a makeshift bed for myself in my office. Linda would occupy our bedroom. The day was awkward, with her parents struggling to navigate the uncomfortable situation. Linda, her mother, and the kids played Monopoly in the living room, while her father, John, and I retreated to the patio for a private conversation. What are you going to do, Tom? John asked, his tone laden with concern. I really don't know, I admitted. But there's a strong chance this is over between us. You should try to forgive, John urged. You've shared a long history and a wonderful family. If she truly loved me, she wouldn't have done this, I replied. Even if they didn't have intercourse, she was with him for a significant time. Does it really matter if he used protection? She might have contracted something or could even be pregnant. The thought was unsettling. She can stay here for now, but we may need to explore other options soon. We rejoined the others for dinner, ordering pizza. Linda's parents eventually left, and as far as I knew, they hadn't discussed Mark with her. As I was putting the girls to bed, Laura, Linda's sister, asked Linda why she had spent the night with Mark. "I'm so sorry," Linda said. "I made a terrible mistake. But I don't understand why it's such a big deal. He's just a football player, not our dad." "We'll talk about it later," I interjected, trying to keep things calm. Once the girls were in bed, Linda went down to the kitchen. I followed her about 10 minutes later. In the meantime, I had called my public defender friend to inquire about the autopsy report. He informed me it was a public document and agreed to get it for me. Linda was drinking Pepsi, as alcohol was not recommended for her. "Are you staying in our room?" she asked. "No, I'll be in the office," I replied. "Well, you're welcome to come by any time," she said. "We'll just have to see where things go. Right now, I don't see a clear path forward for us." I didn't respond and went back to my office to sleep. I struggled to get a good night's rest and woke up at 5 a.m. I made coffee, and reviewed the autopsy report my friend had sent. As I read through it, I focused on the trauma analysis. It appeared Linda had been less than truthful about the events. When Linda insisted that she and Mark Stevens hadn't had intercourse, I struggled to believe it. The timeline just didn't add up. She had been with him for nearly 2 hours before the murder. The morning after, as usual, I took the girls to school. They were noticeably subdued, their usual cheerfulness dimmed by the events of the past few days. I spent a considerable amount of time weighing my options. If it weren't for Linda's condition, I would never have let her back into the house. But there were benefits to allowing her to stay, especially for the sake of the girls. It made their lives a bit easier amidst the chaos. As soon as I walked through the door, another TV truck pulled up outside. A young reporter got out and shouted at me, asking if Linda was home and if I had forgiven her. I gave her a strained smile, waved her away, and warned her not to trespass on our property. Inside, Linda was trying to make amends in her own way. She had baked some cookies and offered me one. I took it but couldn't shake the anxiety from my mind. "There's a TV truck outside," I said. "They don't know you're here, and maybe it's better if they don't." "What do they want?" "They've already reported my name and what happened at Mark's house. Can they do any more damage?" Linda sighed, her eyes full of uncertainty. "I'm sure they can find something else to report. But I need to tell you what happened that night. It's important." I looked at her, trying to gauge her sincerity. "I need you to write down exactly what happened from the moment Mark approached us until you ended up in the hospital. You don't have to do it all at once. If it's too traumatic, you can skip parts and fill them in later." Linda nodded and retreated to her bedroom to start typing at her desk. Meanwhile, I headed to my office to sift through the autopsy reports. I made sure I would get the test results, though I expected it would take a few days. Linda tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy around me, but it was clear she had questions about the night's events. Our routine continued for 2 days until I received the test results. Linda's DNA and fluids were confirmed at the scene, which suggested she had been less than truthful about her account of the night. On the 3rd day, after dinner, Linda walked into my home office with a printout in hand. "I finished writing," she said, her voice trembling. I took the pages from her and began reading. Her account was raw and revealing. "Tom, please forgive me for my weakness. When Mark asked me to dance, I was so thrilled. He was charming and had a notorious reputation. During the dance, I was captivated and didn't think about anything else. When the slow dance started, he pulled me close. I was tempted to give myself to him right then. I don't know why I found him so irresistible, but I did. He told me to sneak out the side door so we could go to his house. He promised it would be the best intimate experience of my life, and I believed him. When the dance ended, I went back to our table, and you weren't there. I agreed to go to the women's room with June. When I returned, I saw how angry you were, but I thought you would get over it. I wanted Mark so badly. We had sex in his car, and as we were finishing, the car alarm went off. He put on his robe and went outside. He told me to wait, but when I looked out the window, I saw someone running away in black. He jumped over the fence. I found a robe and went to the front door. Mark was lying in the driveway, his head smashed. I was in shock, feeling like it was my fault, as if my sins had caused this. The police arrived, and I remember waking up in the hospital. I am so sorry for everything. I love you, and I don't understand why I did what I did. I looked up at Linda, her eyes streaming with tears. Tom, were you the man I saw on the surveillance footage? The police must have told you I was at the house all night, drinking and regretting the end of our marriage. I was consumed by hatred, but that's no excuse for what happened. The police have footage, so you know I was there. I nodded, struggling with my own conflicted feelings. I think Mark Stevens got what he deserved, but not in this way. He did turn our lives upside down. Linda shook her head. No, Tom, he didn't deserve this. He was kind to me, even if he was a mistake. I turned everything upside down, and now I'm paying the price. We sat in silence, the weight of her words and the events of the past week hanging heavily between us. Why not? I want you to understand that I will never be able to love you the same way again, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. Maybe I won't be able to love you at all. The man I thought I married would never have done what you did. Was it worth it? Was the affair worth everything you've lost? What exactly did he lose? You know, the night might have been exciting, but it was hardly worth the consequences. If we had just had that one night and I came home the next day, maybe things could have been different. But now, he's dead, and I'm left with this mess. Linda's face went pale, and she turned on her heel, fleeing the room. No, you killed him, I muttered, my voice low and filled with anguish. After that confrontation, our relationship became frigid. I decided it wasn't worth trying to convince her of my innocence or to mend our relationship in any way. I knew that if I admitted to her what had happened, she would immediately take it to the authorities. I couldn't trust her. She had already made it clear that if Stevens had survived, her affair would have been worth the consequences, although she didn't phrase it quite so bluntly. A few weeks later, I filed for divorce. I requested full custody of the children so they could remain in the house. Since Linda still had a job, I didn't ask for alimony or child support. I just wanted her out. She moved back in with her parents, and I served her the divorce papers there. Linda's father called me soon after. He was furious and wanted me to reconsider. He said Linda was desperate and needed a lawyer. I told him she deserved to be desperate and that she should get legal representation. His anger seemed directed at me, but I wasn't sure if it was due to my actions or Linda's. He inquired about visitation rights, and I informed him that Linda could visit the kids any evening and stay until they went to bed. Linda arrived the next day at 5 p.m. I made macaroni and cheese, and we had dinner with the girls. We played board games and then put them to bed. Afterward, Linda wanted to discuss our situation, but I wasn't in the mood for conversation. We need to figure this out, Tom, Linda insisted. It won't do the girls any good if we're apart. They'll have to adjust, and you should find a place where they can visit you. The sooner we finalize the divorce, the sooner we can establish a visitation schedule. I don't want a divorce, she continued, her voice breaking. I made a huge mistake, but I love you. There's no way we can stay married after what you've done, I replied flatly. Forget about it and move on. Linda began to cry, her tears flowing silently. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it wasn't enough to change my mind. Our marriage was over. The divorce proceedings were finalized, and we worked out a joint custody arrangement. Linda found an apartment with a second bedroom for the girls. We maintained a distant but amicable relationship, focusing on the well-being of the children. About 4 months later, I began dating again. I started seeing women from our social circle and from work. They knew I was single and seemed interested in me. When Linda had the girls, I brought several women home for the night. Although the relationships were brief, the intimacy was usually satisfying. I avoided married women, despite some showing interest, as my experience had made me wary of entanglements that could lead to further complications. Linda was good with the kids but struggled on her own. She took antidepressants and slept a lot but managed to continue working and fulfilling her responsibilities. Her parents and the girls told me she wasn't dating anyone. Over the years, Shelley went off to college, and Laura was about to start her freshman year. They had adapted well to the joint custody arrangement and seemed to be adjusting to their new routines. I entered into a long-term relationship with Cody, a woman I met one night at a bar. Like me, Cody was divorced and had 2 children of her own. Her husband had moved to the West Coast, and she was 35 when we met. Her children were twins in their second year of college. When they left for school, Cody moved into my home. I had grown to love her. She was funny, intelligent, and our intimacy was fulfilling. Although she might not have been as striking as Linda, Cody was attractive and garnered attention when we were out together. I shared details about the chaos surrounding Mark Stevens' death with Cody, although I never revealed the specifics of how he died. The uproar eventually subsided, and no one was arrested or charged in connection with his death. One Saturday, Detective Logan showed up at my house. I invited him in, though I was alone. Last week, I retired with a comfortable pension, and I was happy to share the news. "Congratulations," I said. "But what brings you here?" "I wanted to let you know," he replied, "that I was convinced you were responsible for that idiot's death. And honestly, he deserved it, though perhaps not your wife. I didn't do it, but if anyone did, they were right to do so." I raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "Why do you think Linda didn't deserve it?" "It was just one night, Tom," he said. "She made a mistake, but it's not like she was a habitual offender. If it had been a secret affair, maybe we could have worked through it. But the whole thing was so public, so blatant. That's what makes it unforgivable." I nodded, understanding the nuance in his words. "How's your partner doing?" "She's a captain now," he said with a hint of pride. "Really making waves, that one." It was insightful of her to move up the ranks so quickly. We shook hands, and he left. As for Linda, she made some progress in her recovery. We shared rides when I took Shelley to school, and on one such trip, I asked her how she was managing. "How are you doing, Linda?" "I'm getting by," she responded. "I've got a boyfriend now, sort of like a friend with benefits." "I know you and Cody are together." "Well, yes, we are," I said, "and we might even move in together once the kids are out of the house." Linda's eyes were wistful as she whispered, "I wish none of this had happened. We could have been empty nesters now, having fun without the baggage." We both shared a moment of sadness and regret, tears filling our eyes. Linda eventually moved into her boyfriend's apartment, but it seemed she never fully recovered from that night. I wondered if I ever would, either. Reflecting on the ordeal, I realized that despite the personal cost, my actions might have saved other marriages. It felt like one of my most effective, albeit unconventional, acts of altruism. In the end, I'm left with a mix of emotions, regret, sorrow, and a strange sense of accomplishment. I guess every action has its consequences, and sometimes, they ripple out in ways we can't predict. As I wrote these thoughts down, I prepared to share my story online. What do you think? I asked my readers. How do you feel about actions like mine? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.